That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome to the intersection of faith and fear, where we discuss each week what scares us in order to find what saves us. This is the Fear of God podcast. Not only is today's episode one of our already special subset of episodes dubbed Quarterly King, episodes that we feature every 25 episodes or so, meant to celebrate the gunslinger to our quartet, that of one Uncle Stevie King. But today is also an even more special of special episodes because the material we're covering is about a man who sets out to murder a corrupt would-be president, and this conversation releases on America's election day. No, that was not intentional at all. I am one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And, well, he was here a minute ago, but said he had to spend the afternoon making some bookcases. We'll find out what that means. He'll be back, relaxed and with a smile on his face, I am sure. But in the meantime, I want to let you know that you can find the Fear of God podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and that your official source for all things foggy is our website, thefearofgodpodcast.com. And also Reed. Hey, buddy, that was fast.
Hey, that was fast. You interrupted me in the middle of my bookcase making. I'm not quite prepared to just give me a minute.
Okay.
No.
We're ready when you are.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm good.
10-second man.
How are you, man?
It's birthday month.
It is birthday month.
You are 40.
It's crazy. Oh, man. It's true. It's true. If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't work.
Speaking of the dead zone.
it's oh, man. We got a live one here, folks. Okay, so there's something afoot. There's something underway. I hear more than just you going on.
Yeah,
in
man.
The room around you.
It's quarterly.
Did that multiple personality disorder finally get diagnosed, or is there there something else underway?
Still needs to get looked at. But being that it is a quarterly king, we do have some of our pod bros in attendance. Do you want to inform the listeners of who's in our company?
Oh, I would be delighted to do that. Yeah. So as a matter of fact, we have made it something of a no. We've made it something of a tradition to introduce these quarterly kings by casting ourselves as characters in the dead zone in this case, but in whatever work we are covering from Stephen King. So this time around, I'm doing a couple of qualifiers. I'm doing book casting only. So this is book casting, and this is also right out the gate, because since somebody won't ever let us forget who I was when we covered it,
Beverly.
then
I remember that.
Yeah. Wasn't gonna say, but now here we are. So since somebody won't let us forget, I also chose not to include Sarah in the casting choices at all. I also think too highly and too fondly of any of you to cast any of you as the maniac Greg Stilson. So Greg Stilson is not in this conversation. Okay,
that is appreciated.
That having been said, I guess I'll start with myself, because boy, what a clueless individual I am, and I'm just constantly spending all my days.
Don't be too hard on yourself, brother.
Thinking I know. Yes, that's true. That's true. Thinking I know what's really going on, but in point of fact, I'm very clueless, and the town is ready for me to catch up. The whole town is waiting for me to get with the program. So, so in the role of Sheriff Bannerman, I have cast myself, which I think is most appropriate for that.
Well, but, Tom Skerritt's a handsome individual, and so are you. So.
Not as handsome as Tom Skerritt, but I appreciate the compliment. That's kind of cool.
So
I needed a contemplative expert in his field, somebody who is filled with the spirit of curious study and compassionate expertise. I needed somebody who was going to be able to just be able to hold his own and be able to help, wean people out of their sleepiness and be able to, they've been in this fog for however many years, and he can guide them out. In the role of Dr. Sam Wyzak, we have Mr. Ian Olson. Ian Olson, welcome to the conversation about the Dead Zone. It's
Wyzak, potato.
Yeah,
Dr.
I know,
W.
depending on movie or book, it's one or the other. So I also wanted somebody who was generous and always willing to learn and always willing to give people a second chance. Though I must admit they're occasionally quite wrong in their conclusions about everything. So in that spirit, cast in the role of Mr. Roger Chatsworth is Mr. Blake Collier. Blake, how are you, buddy?
Of course.
The Rod.
It is really good to see you, my friend. Really good.
Good seeing you.
And then also in the role of the lovable, everybody just can't get enough of him, everyman, who occasionally needs help reading the material that we have to cover. But in the role of Chuck Chatsworth, we have our wonderful resident everyman, Mr. Andy Hillabofus Whitfield. Hello, how are you,
Hello,
sir?
blessings.
Welcome.
It is really, really good to see you, my friend. And so, when I did this, I really wanted to cast a Jimmy Carter, since Jimmy Carter's in the book, because that just delights my heart. Jimmy Carter's not in the movie, by the way. He doesn't make a cameo. I don't know why they didn't get on that, but he is in the book. But I couldn't find a role for Jimmy Carter, so in the role of the one who has been wandering his way through a coma for years and years and years, forgetting everything that has gone on in the lives of all of his friends and loved ones, but holds your hand and makes you see things that you never knew were possible and real, is my dear friend, Mr. Nathan Rouse as Johnny Smith. Johnny, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. Every time I ask a question, you're just gonna jolt. You're just gonna jerk. Like I'm prepared.
The house is on fire.
It's not too late.
The ice is gonna break.
That was good.
Oh my gosh. So before we move into our big collection of talk about the Dead Zone, which I think is going to be a really, really great one. I must mention, listeners, a brief bit of business time. If you have not taken the opportunity to go to thefearofgodpodcast.com, click on the banner at the top to take you to the survey where you can vote on your favorite episodes of your favorite horror films of 2013 through 2020. Go there, vote now. We are recording this a bit early, so we don't yet know what our coverage is going to be, but you can influence that. So go to the website, click on the banner, vote for your favorites. We're going to be counting down your top 10 and featuring a film from the top 10, 2013, all the way up through 2020. That starts next week, so you do not have much time. Please go and vote and make your voice heard, as well as, since this releases on Election Day, if we can influence anybody to move out and go and right now make your voice heard in the much more consequential election, then please go do so. And so yes, that is a brief bit of business.
We want to get out of
time.
the dead zone.
Yes, true that. As has been our predilection for a while, we actually have got a little round table of questions that we're going to be discussing here. But do y'all mind if I just hit with a couple of brief trivia bits to sort of launch the pad? I should ask, does anybody have any particular trivial bits that they researched or that they want to? Nope, everybody's shaking their head. So, all right. So just mention a couple of things here. Something I found interesting, and this is in the film, because I should say we are going to be mentioning both the book by Stephen King and the film directed by David Cronenberg. So to make Johnny's flashes seem more involuntary, Cronenberg would fire blanks just off camera to make him jolt. Yeah, it was actually Christopher Walken's suggestion. He wanted it, and so yeah, that's why, just to make it a little involuntary. That man's nuts. That man's a little crazy.
David.
Blow out the mic.
Something that is Something that is well known in Stephen King lore, but The Dead Zone is actually the first of the many Castle Rock stories, which are horror tales that take place in the fictional Maine town that would arguably become Stephen King's most noteworthy fictional locale. Other Castle Rock stories include, but are not limited to, Cujo, The Dark Half, Needful Things, and The Body, which would later become the film Stand By Me. Dead Zone was King's fifth novel. It was published following The Stand, but it was his very first hardcover #1 bestseller. He had also published the short story collection Night Shift and the two Richard Bachman novels, Rage and The Long Walk, before Dead Zone was published. But Dead Zone remains, when adjusted for inflation and calculating all the rest, Dead Zone remains one of King's most financial successful novels ever published from at the time of its release. So it was a big runaway hit.
How much did it make?
Did you? Hey,
to believe it or not, I couldn't find. Yeah.
Did you happen to identify where chronologically Dead Zone was published in terms of his career?
79, I believe, because I think Stand was 78. So.
When was Carrie? Yeah. Oh, fifth novel.
Carrie was like 70. Carrie was very first. Carrie was the very first thing he ever published.
What year?
I believe it was 73. I'm looking it up right now, as a matter of fact.
What was the book that's banned? When was that one?
That's
you know
Rage.
What I'm talking about?
Yes. So Rage, which was published prior to The Dead Zone, but Rage was
prior.
Yeah, so Rage was published in 77. So Carrie was actually 74. So this is 5 years into his known published career. Carrie was published in 74. Rage, which Andy was just mentioning, was published under the pseudonym Richard Bachman. King has since requested that it be pulled from publication, so it is no longer in print. Though Stephen King's publications are so widely popular, it's actually not that hard to find a copy of Rage, but no new publications of it will ever go into print for reasons that I think are well thought out and rightfully so. Okay, so I have a couple of other trivia bits. Yeah, please do.
So I had the expanded version of The Stand. So it seems like, and we learned when we did the writing episode, if listeners will remember, that he like takes it as a job. Does he work on 2 consecutive novels at the same time just because of the length of The Stand? Maybe this is not a question that can be answered, but my understanding so he works at about 2 at the same. So he's got okay, thank you.
He usually, so from what I understand, from what he said, like in interviews and stuff about his habits, is that he pretty much writes every day.
Right.
He had jokingly said in one interview, I didn't write this down, so some of this is from memory if some of the facts are slightly off, but he had joked in an interview that he takes his birthday, Christmas, and July 4th off, but that he writes every other day. In more recent years, he clarified, he's like, that was a joke. The truth is, I write every day if I'm working on something. I usually write for 4 or 5 hours every day if I'm working on something. That frequently means he's working on a first draft of some new thing, and then that's all he's working on while he's working on it. But then when he finishes that draft, he tucks it away for a period of time or gives it to some people to read and proofread and provide feedback while he's then working on something else, some other new idea that he's got. So then as he's rewriting, and especially you can see this if you look at like the publication links and stuff, as he's rewriting material, he probably could be working on 4 or 5 different things simultaneously because he's rewriting them. But that, from what I understand of how he's described his habits, is what it is, which helps him stay so prolific and keeps his publication. He's published at least 2 books every year for the past more than a decade. Some of the books are thinner in length. Some of them are massive, like Under the Dome and 11/22/63 and all these. And then some of them are thinner, like Joyland or The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon or whatever. But he has published at least a couple of books a year for probably the last 10 to 20 years. So yeah, it's pretty insane. And he just recently published If It Bleeds, which I don't know. I think, Andy, you had started that one, or maybe you finished reading it. Did anybody else read If It Bleeds? That's his most recent publication as of this recording.
I own it.
See, there it is.
Hey, that's a step.
That's half the battle. That's half the battle. So I have a couple of other bits of trivia that'll probably come up as we move through. So y'all ready to get into some of the roundtable conversation? Is that good?
Let's do it.
All right. So I have a couple of prompts that we'll make, and then we will maybe pivot over into some deeper thematic waters. So first off, I want to talk about just comments around the general performances. So this question is kind of open-ended. I'll call on you and prompt you to give your feedback. But the question on the table is, what are some standout performances, either performances that you really like or performances that you don't really care for, and why? So, Andy, I'm going to go to you first. And I guess as you're mentioning this, maybe also mention, just sort of your history with it. Was this the first time you'd seen the film, first time you've encountered the story, whatever you've got with it, and then talk about one of the performances from the movie.
This was the first time I've seen the film. This was the first time I have read half the book, and I'm at like 290. And to me, it felt like a TV movie. I don't know if it was, but it felt like a made-for-TV movie, like Salem's Lot. I don't know if any of you have seen that.
It was a theatrical release.
That was a dig. And Christopher Walken just wasn't who I expected Johnny to be from what I read. I mean, it might have been different. I just expected Johnny to be like younger. I don't know how old Christopher Walken really is, but he just looks like 50 with like dyed hair in the thing. And Sarah doesn't look exactly how I pictured her, and I really wish the mom would have got more screen time. Because I liked her character because of everything going on with all the conspiracy theories in the world right now. I liked it. I like what she had, it just resonated with me because of everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sure.
But, and the dad was like super sweet. It's just, the film was it just felt like when you're reading a Stephen King book, or half of a Stephen King book. It's so long and so detailed, and the film felt like it's like an hour and 20 minutes, and it's just like boom, 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 boom. And the ending was a big surprise because I hadn't finished.
Yeah. You're like, I never saw that coming.
I didn't see it coming, but I don't know. It felt like a TV movie, and I thought Christopher. I just maybe they couldn't cast good characters. I don't know.
All
right, so not high praise from Andy on the performance.
Starting on one particular foot there, yeah.
No. I will come back to the commentary on the mom in a different question, because I think that's a really important note, especially because the mom is given a lot more time in the book than she's given in the film, and there's a lot of interesting things going on, to me, interesting things in the book. So we'll come back to that. Ian, I'm going to come to you next. Performances that you liked or didn't like, and also a bit of history with your history with the story.
So I read The Dead Zone when I was in 4th grade, and I haven't read it since then. I did not get a copy for this time around.
Sorry. Understood.
Sorry. I rewatched the movie, not the Anthony Michael Hall series.
No.
I rewatched the David Cronenberg film with Kristen when we got back from our trip to Minneapolis. I had seen it some years back and didn't really remember much except Christopher Walken constantly going.
That's because David Cronenberg was firing blanks off.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, turns out.
Bunch of wild and crazy
clever
guys.
Hollywood magic.
Method acting. But I gotta tell you, I like that Christopher Walken got cast in it. He is such an atypical look that it makes it stand out automatically. But also his performance is imbued with such wide-eyed astonishment and dread at what's happening that I just believe that we're witnessing in real time his own discovery of these frightening, inexplicable abilities. Where do they come from? What does this mean? Just his visage just communicates, I don't know what any of this is. He sells it.
Awesome. No, understandable. Nathan, how about for you?
Sure. I saw the film first with you circa, I don't know, 2002, somewhere in there. But only loosely remembered the plot or just the major beats. I'd never read the text, and I did this time complete the audio version on 1.5 speed, by the way. What was really funny is every now and then it would auto reset itself to normal speed. I'm like, why is Franco talking so slow? And did rewatch the film this go round. So the question of performances,
1.5 times.
1 1/3 times, yeah, or maybe just one completely. I will point to Martin Sheen, whom I have a great deal of affection for the man Martin Sheen, and also a great deal of love for his Jed Bartlett of West Wing. And so this is such an extreme contrast to that. I listened to the book in really close proximity to my first viewing of the film, and because of that had some more neutral feelings about the film because of how much I enjoyed the book. In other words, something like my reference to Martin Sheen. I think he's great at full Greg Stilson. I wish the movie had given us something more to kind of chew on. Although, admittedly, even as I say that, the book starts with him killing a dog. So it's not like he really starts at a place of, being a peaceable person.
Right, of course.
That said, to answer the question, Martin Sheen, I think, is great casting and delivers what the script needs from him.
Sure. No, understand. Blake, how about for you?
I'm going to kind of split the sheets.
All right. So, okay.
So basically,
it's a new one.
I agree. Yeah. So I agree with Andy that I didn't picture Christopher Walken in that role, but I did see someone more like Andy Griffith-ish, almost too good for his own good. And so in that sense, I didn't really think he fit, but on the whole, I mean, I adore Christopher Walken, so I'm not going to scoff at him showing up in a movie. I'll enjoy it regardless. Now, I do agree with Nathan that I think Martin Sheen is easily the best actor in the film, hands down, because he has that schmarmy, just that grimy, sleazy element, and he pulls it off completely. And like Nathan also said, it's interesting to see him go to such extremes, playing presidential nominee and then the president in West Wing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shows really the range of his acting ability. So yeah, not what I expected for Johnny, but I didn't dislike Walken, and I think Martin Sheen was superb.
Awesome. So my own history, I have only this time through is only the second time I've read the book. I read the book in kind of late high school when I was acclimating myself with as much. I was kind of getting into Stephen King and reading as much of what had already been published at that time frame as possible. So I'd read the book then. I have seen the movie multiple times because the film is one of my favorite adaptations of King's books. So I'm a big fan of the film. I think I probably am going to heap the highest praise on Walken as Johnny Smith of anybody in our little collection. Because to me, maybe because of when I encountered the film and when I saw it, maybe because of my feelings about his performance, Christopher Walken to me has embodied Johnny in a way that even as I also listened to the James Franco audiobook to reacclimate myself this time around. And even as I was listening to it, I couldn't see anybody else in the role of Johnny than Christopher Walken. One of the things that stood out to me is just he's not unattractive, but not traditionally handsome. So Walken really sort of fits that bill. Also kind of lanky and a bit awkward in his movements and in his presentation, which also I kind of connected him with. But also I think kind of piggybacking on what Ian said, I think Walken brings a kind of almost a confusion to what's happening and a bit of a benign innocence where it's I don't really know if I should be doing this or not. And I don't know if I should be doing this, what I should be doing and how I should be responding to what's happening. And I feel like that comes through really well in the book. I feel like the only reason it comes through in the film at all is a credit to Walken and the way that he carries himself in the role. So for me, there's not really any performances that I dislike in the film, though there's a collection of roles that are just like walk on. They're there. I will say that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
All I was going to say is purely because it hurts my heart, Colleen Dewhurst as an insane woman was really troubling and difficult for me to experience. I just want her to be Marilla Cuthbert. You know,
I understand. Well, and that actor who plays Frank Dodd, the Nicholas Campbell, who has been, from my understanding, in a number of other Cronenberg films over time, but he does a very creepy job. That one scene, and we can probably get into this in just a second. This might be a good segue. My next question for everybody, and then I'll answer with this moment, is a couple of moments from the production in general that really stand out to you. The film as a whole is not your traditional horror fright fest. It's got some scary existential undertones. It's got some scary sort of situational moments going on. But if there is like a straight up horror moment, I think it's Nicholas Campbell like getting close to, about to impale himself on those scissors, which is a truly gruesome and graphic. It's not quite the way Frank Dodd kills himself in the book, but it is truly horrific. So I think he's really chilling to that end. My question is kind of two parts. So mention a moment or two, if you want, that you like about the production. I'm also curious to know, maybe these are the same answer, maybe they're two different answers, if there's something that you feel the book does better than the film, or vice versa. Compare and contrast the book and the film and the specific adaptation. I'll give you kind of a second to think about that. While I mention this one other thing, one thing that I will mention for myself that I prefer in the adaptation, I had forgotten when I reread the book that the book spends about the first third with Johnny in the coma. Like it's about a third of the way through the book before Johnny even wakes up. And because it's only about 10 minutes into the movie before he wakes up, I was really surprised. I was like, damn, he's still in a coma. He's still asleep.
Somebody wake that man up.
We're getting to know all these people. I'm like, what's going on? So that is one thing that I appreciate about the pacing of the film that I do think is smart, is they didn't spend a lot of that time while Johnny was in the coma that the book lays out and goes through periodically. So that's one big thing that I would mention. Nathan, I'm going to come to you next. So something about the production or some differences from the book that you really think are interesting or worth mentioning.
I will say a thing I like that the movie does that at least wasn't as clear to me if it's sort of presented this way in the book is I really loved the imagery of when Johnny's experiencing the hallucinations, when he is sort of both in and out of them at the same time. Specifically, that starts with the fire scene, and just I don't know, in my head I wasn't thinking about how they might depict this, and so when he's suddenly in the home but in the bed, it was really cool.
Yeah, right.
So I really liked that. It will be, because I spent so much time with the audiobook and grew to be so invested in the story, I would echo Andy in large part that the movie feels like a greatest hits of the book while missing, to me, what is really strong in the book. So for instance, in real specific terms here, I think the Wheel of Fortune carnival scene is about as integral to the themes as anything in the book is. And so to start without that felt, it's not that you can't omit certain things. It's that then also, to your point, Andy, things like Vera starts at 100 and never isn't at 100. And I think that's a missed opportunity. And in fact, My preference would have been just don't have her. Like if we're not going to see that progression, because ultimately I don't think it matters to the film, because they give Bannerman her sort of signature line to Johnny, so she doesn't need to be in there. So it didn't make a ton of sense why you cut some rich thematic moments in favor of other things that just don't matter as much, which invites the question of majoring on the minors for the film version. That all of that said, in the book, I think that opening run of he and Sarah at the carnival, like what I wrote down was they're listening to the audio, which had a different kind of frequency than physically reading it. I was moved almost to tears at Sarah and Johnny's reunion once he does wake up. And I feel like the movie, what is so strong about the thread of that relationship in the book, it's a tragic romance. It is doomed, and they both, and you as the reader feel the weight of that. I don't feel like the movie, which, listen, I'm open to like reconsidering, but my viewing of the movie this time, with as much as I came in with liking the book, it was like icebergs above the water. And I'm like, man, there's some really good stuff just below that you guys kind of left there, specifically with things like the Sarah Johnny relationship and what propels that whole thread, which is the Wheel of Fortune scene. I think it's a great scene.
No, absolutely. Andy, I know you had only made it about halfway through the book, but in general, either comparing, piggybacking off of some of that, or just speaking about some moments from the film that you responded to positively or negatively, what would you say about the general production and its relationship to the book?
I would echo Nathan's iceberg comment. I think that like the beginning, the Wheel of Fortune scene, like he's on a roller coaster in the film, like that just is like, and the fact that like, yeah, he got a headache, but like, I think it would have been better to have shown him as a kid getting hit in the head or whatever happened, and then
on the ice,
on the ice, and then he got, he already had the dead zone in him, if that's what we're calling it. I don't know what they're calling it. It was weird that he was already sweating when the fire thing happened.
Oh yeah.
Like knowing what was going to happen in the book, and then and then it happened. Like it's like he already knew what was happening before he touched her. And so that for me took away, it didn't take away, I knew what was going on, but like he was already like sweating in a fire. And then she came and touched him. So he was already there. I don't know.
What's interesting, I apologize for cutting you off, but what's interesting about that is that actually wasn't like what that sheen was actually flame retardant gel that they had put on him. And so then it was, and it created the effect like you just described. It looks like he's sweating, but that was actually a very necessary sort of application for the practical effect of him being in the bed while he's anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because you'd mentioned that.
Well, why didn't they cut the scene? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it happened in two places.
Production limitations, 1984.
The other thing that I thought was weird is, I don't know if it goes into the book about the kid who couldn't read. I expected him to be older and like a football star.
Did you get that far in the book?
I'm right where he is at the mansion teaching him to read, and he changed his way that he was doing it. So I didn't know that he changed like his life, that he was going to die. But like, why couldn't any of those kids swim?
Well, and it's worth mentioning, and maybe won't go into too many details here, but it's worth mentioning that if there is a major, other than just omissions for probably practical purposes as much as anything else, the major narrative change from book to film is that story, because in the book, Johnny tutors him all the way up through graduating high school. And then it is the night of his high school graduation. Johnny has a vision of him and many of his class peers burning up in a fire that is at their local bar where they all go. It's like a tradition in that town where graduation night, they go hang out at this bar. Well, Johnny has a vision that they're all going to die in a fire that night. And so he tries to get them to stop. The major difference, and I apologize if I'm stealing what anybody else was going to mention. It just came up in the natural progression of things. But one of the things that I love so much about the book, I really wish they had found a way to do it, is in the book, his dad yields to Johnny's request and invites many of the kids to come and just hang out at their house for a party. And he does it all while not believing Johnny. He doesn't believe that anything bad is going to happen, but still invites the kids over, and then realizes that Johnny saved his son's life. And so because he had made that choice, it's far less like gut-wrenchingly tragic as it is in the film. In the film, the dad is stubborn and still proceeds with it. His son is okay, but those other two kids died. Whereas in this one, the dad feels a tremendous amount of gratitude to Johnny, and he goes on to pay Johnny's medical bills out of gratitude. He just wipes the slate clean on all of Johnny's medical bills from the 5 years in a coma. So it's a much more like enlivening narrative beat than they chose to do in the film. Though I don't dislike the thing in the film, he was much older in the book. You're on par there. Did you have anything? Yeah, go ahead.
The last thing I would say is I think the murders would have had a bigger impact if they were actually kids, like in the book.
Yeah.
I know it's
in the book.
I know it's like 1984, and it's. I wish I couldn't see Ian right now.
And he's a big proponent of child murderers in movies.
But like, I mean, I don't know.
Do you mean the Strangler, the Castle Rock Strangler?
Yeah. He killed kids.
No, he killed all over the age.
Well, the last one was like close to the sheriff's daughter and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that would have had more of an impact than the girl by the beach. I didn't even know Castle Rock was by the beach, and so
yeah,
there you go. That's I think if it would have had some kid killing, it would have had some.
I understand. In the book, his final victim is a 9-year-old, which is largely what pushes Johnny to go ahead and try to help out. Yeah. So Ian, coming to you next. Same question.
Well, I mean, you mean to tell me that these people live by a beach and they can't swim? I don't buy it. A moment that I really liked from the film was Dr. W. This verges into my favorite vision, but so I'll save it for that. And instead, I will say that the transposition of in the book, it begins with Johnny on the ice, and he has like a vision, right? And the way that gets transposed into what happens with Chris, the student that he tutors, and he's trying to revert that. And I just kind of wish that we had something from Johnny's childhood that I like that the dead zone in the film becomes the way that he and Dr. W are trying to understand like what's going on. And in the film, the dead zone is like, oh, okay, so there's the possibility of changing this, right? But it is an interesting idea that in the novel, at least, the dead zone is that part of his brain, his mind that it's not functional, it doesn't work. And that the accident jostled what's been dormant for so long that it has been exercised once before. And now here it is coming back in force.
Right.
So can we do without it? Yeah, I think so. I guess it would have been perhaps then, going on a wooden roller coaster and getting a headache all of a sudden.
Right, which is basically all that happens in the movie.
Oh,
No.
Sarah, I don't know what's happening. It doesn't. Oh.
Let's go make some.
And I miss Sarah throwing up from hot dogs, you know.
So Blake, same question.
So I forgot to say my background of the film along the last question. So I'll say that this is probably the third or fourth time I've seen the film. I read the book, or I listened to the book with James Franco reading it back in like March, April for the first time. So production wise, I think for me, this movie is a film I watched when I was young with my parents. I remember seeing it for better or ill. Whether I should have been watching it at the age I probably did, that's a whole nother question. But it's one of those that stuck with me for a long time.
Sure.
I didn't always. It wasn't one of those that like made me love film or anything like that. But when I would think about Christopher Walken, that's one of the first films that would come to mind. And so for me, just knowing, like coming into loving horror and things like that, knowing that this is a Cronenberg film and how severely different it is from the rest of his films during this time period in his filmography, it's one of those things like production wise, I enjoy seeing or trying to figure out what it was about this material that drew him and trying to find him in the film because it's so different.
Yeah.
So on that note, it's more of a general like production note. Like I enjoy the film itself, maybe for extra textual reasons, more than anything. But I think as far as elements between the book and the film, I actually didn't really particularly care for the mother in the book. So in some ways, I actually probably would have been like Nathan, fine with them cutting that part out of the movie completely and just letting Tom Skerritt deliver those lines without her appearance. So I'm open to that discussion because I feel like there's some good discussion coming about the mom in the book.
Yeah, sure.
But I think, I think I can. It's hard for me to disagree with the seeming greatest hits, as has been said by Andy and Nathan both, and Ian to some extent. That it feels very much trying to rush through the story. The book has a lot more detail. It will let you spend time with all the characters. If I had one critique from the book, it would be Stillson feels a little too villainous.
In the book.
Like, there's no in the book.
Like, there's no nuance for him. And I understand why probably King did that, but he always just feels detached from everything else. And like of course, this is the guy that is going to end up colliding with Johnny in the end. From the time the dog, he kicks or kills the dog in the book. So I think the book is clearly the winner as far as getting the detail of the characters down and kind of just letting you invest time in it. But I just really like the production as a whole of the film. So,
if I can jump in, it feels like a thing, a strength of the film, of the book is almost from go. You realize Stillson and Johnny are at opposite ends of a path that is just, if you picture like a V, they're on two versions that is just gonna collide, and so that's kind of cool about the book is and so in the book, divergences like the Castle Rock Strangler and the Bannerman story feel less like indulgences or pointless exercises as much as they just do. We need to get to know how this stuff kind of operates for Johnny. We need Stillson's rise to power to happen so that they are both in a position to collide with each other, because that's a really cool trajectory. Right. Whereas in the book, Stillson, in the movie, and this on a certain level is kind of cool, except it robs you of that two sides of the same coin feeling. On a certain level, I like that Stillson is pretty off the grid in terms of the film for quite some time. And then whether it's little posters, campaign posters in the background here, or a reference there, he doesn't have much of a role until about midway or so. And which is kind of interesting, but I think what is more interesting is the book's take of these sort of items are rushing at each other, and we get to kind of experience that trajectory, and it's pretty cool.
But if I can jump onto that, so it's cool. I don't think that one is a priori better than the other, but given that what the film is doing is Walken is utterly beside himself, not understanding what's going on, is Johnny Smith is discovering a vocation.
Right.
And we'll talk about this more later, but the fact that his abilities are a gift, they are not a curse. So we are watching him in more or less real time figure out how to wield this, not just like endure the fact that this happens outside of his control, but like, so what do I do with this? And so it can feel like this picaresque thing, like the many misadventures of Johnny Smith, you know, and they're just pearls on a string and they're not attached to each other. But I guess that perhaps if I try to give Cronenberg, you know, credit for the modifications introduced in this adaptation, that he's just capturing the person in the middle of a world awakening to this thing, finding out how to use it, and discovering, okay, what I'm supposed to do is this now that I've encountered this man. So the book gives you the epic vision of the divergent paths, the equal and opposite. I guess what I'm saying is you have a hero of destiny in both, but in the movie version, you have the hero of destiny who really takes up that station by being a hero of choice, of saying, okay, this is what I have to do.
Right.
And finding it painful moment by painful moment.
Is that a literary trope? Is that the right word?
It will be.
Destiny?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well,
I'm not trying to make fun.
No, you're not. No, it's
Received.
but
No.
no, it's and it's something that what you're scratching at there, Ian, is I feel like the book, it is, we begin with Johnny and Greg, we end with Johnny and Greg, and we keep talking about these divergent paths that we see steadily growing closer and closer together. The film feels like 4 episodes, 15 to 20 minute episodes of a abbreviated TV show, because it all feels succinct. His coma and him waking up and the reporter would be like 1. Episode 2 would be his uncovering of the Castle Rock Strangler. Episode 3 would be the tutelage of the boy and the closure of that. And then 4 would be Stilson. And Stilson does not feel as layered into the rest of it. Admittedly, though, Martin Sheen does appear, you know, about the time that the boy's being tutored and in sort of that part of the film. But no, I agree that the book layers much more into, hey, this is progressive, and this is a V that's coming together where this ultimate collision is going to happen. And in the book, Johnny's own revelations, which will, this will segue into the next question. His own revelations build upon one another to give him the conclusion to what he does at the end of it. Whereas in the film, it feels, and I love the film, I'm not taking anything away from it, but it does feel very much like, so I should probably do something about this, So what do you think, Dr. W? Would you do this or would you not? And it feels very sort of like spontaneous and of the moment. Whereas in the book, there's a definite progression between the things he could change, couldn't change, and then ultimately with the rescuing of Chuck, can change and does change, which funnels him directly into doing what he does with Greg. So that was going to be my next question that we'll go roundabout is, which of the visions, and I'm going to say from book or film for answer to this question, which of the visions do you find the most compelling and interesting? If you know why, great. If it's just something that resonates with you or you find compelling, then that's also fine. Blake, I'm going to come to you first. Which of the visions in either the book or the film do you find the most compelling?
I feel like the standout is pretty easily the house on fire with the girl. I mean, that's the moment where I kind of see Cronenberg, his footprints the most. And in the movie is that it feels like Cronenberg's all about embodiment, trying to figure out how bodies fit in a space. And that's the first, like, at least I think it's the first time that we see Christopher Walken kind of inhabit the vision and actually be a part of the vision. And so it's no longer just him seeing stuff. It's actually him experiencing the shock and the horror of the little girl. And it becomes a reality. Like, it becomes, this is not just a thing that happens to me. These are people's lives that I could do something about. So yeah, it's hard to say otherwise. I feel that's just such a standout moment that it's so different from the remainder of the visions that he has.
No, I understand. Ian, what about you? What vision do you find most compelling?
The one of Dr. W's past. So from a production standpoint, it's just a completely different setting. You know, just the escape of refugees in Poland as the Wehrmacht is rolling in. Just entirely different location. What's going on? It just becomes a World War II movie for 30 seconds. So it's just visually completely light years away from anything else that we see in the movie. But then he tells Dr. W, and I found it really moving that Dr. W is saying, like, that's impossible. My mother's dead. He looks up the name, calls the number, and we hear someone pick up. And then the way that he just covers his eyes, like when he hears her voice, I found that really poignant.
Yeah. Well, and also I'll comment on this one thing that may come up later more substantively in a later question. Dr. W's differing responses to Johnny's questions there are really important, because Johnny points him in the direction of his still living mother. He calls her up, can't have a conversation with her. And when Johnny asks why, he says, because it wasn't meant to be. And then later he asks Dr. W in different contexts. He says, you know, if you had the chance to go back and kill Hitler, would you? And Dr. W says, you know, I didn't write the whole speech down, but basically, like, I have taken an oath to preserve life and to protect people and to make sure that I deliver care to the sick and the needy. And so on that basis, I have no choice but to kill the SOB, you know? And so, which is a very contrasting response than what he had to his mother, which I find very interesting in general.
Which I also think brings cohesion. So yes, I agree that structurally there's a disjointedness to this film, but it doesn't make it feel so like, you know, why is he asking this guy for his advice here? Because he can say, like, it wasn't meant to be. I'm just not supposed to get back in touch with her again. That's over. Right. This is the kind of person that you ask this question. Right. And you can reasonably expect, like, I'm going to get a good answer.
No, understood. Nathan, what would you say? Most compelling vision.
I mean, I think the fire one, that one is probably the strongest, because of how unready I was for what it would happen just sort of in film, you know, like just in camera. And it kind of woke me up to, oh, okay, this is kind of cool.
Right.
Yeah, I've got thoughts, but they don't quite gel with this question, so we'll places to put them.
We can save them. Andy, what about for you? What would you say?
The killer scene, when he sees the I don't know, the guy just seemed, I wish I couldn't see you guys. The guys just seem kind of, he seems creepy. He seems creepy, and he just the setup is just, you know, I don't know. I just go back to are we allowed to talk about the book?
Oh, please. Yeah. No. Yeah. Book, film, anything. Yeah.
I think the book is a stronger scene with the killer, And I like the idea of in the book where he's just like searching the ground and he gets frostbite, in his hands and has to go to the hospital, afterwards. And then the shooting of the mom, he doesn't see that. And I'm getting off point, but I liked how he got to the scene of the killer in the book a lot more than just grabbing instantly. Like, just, I don't know. I like he could feel the area and know without, and it doesn't do that in the movie. He has to touch the person, but I like that he has this power that he could feel around the area and sense what's going on. Now,
to your credit, Andy, the book does expound or expand what is possible with those capabilities. And in fact, if you do end up going back to the book, there's a really interesting and fascinating expression of it when, if you remember in the film, when he's hanging out in the gallery of the lodge place where he shoots Stilson at the end. In the book, he actually gets resonance off the wood of the floor he's sitting on, unintentionally, like it just kind of happens. So I'm with you. I think it's pretty cool when he utilizes it beyond just the touch that becomes so performative and so theatrical and dramatic in the film. So yeah, I'm with you there.
Maybe y'all could clear this up for me. Can he intentionally do this? Because I wonder, and not to be crass, but when he and Sarah meet again,
bookcases,
they touch, and does he not see can he control it?
A great unexplored question.
Well, and so honestly, and
that's for the love of God episode.
I was going to mention that I do wonder, and obviously there's a profound degree of relationship that is baked into their reunion and a lot of history, but I mean, I did wonder about that, Andy, as well. Like, and have wondered about it before, where I'm just kind of like, okay, well, why? He just, shakes Greg Stilson's hand and sees this big, profound, futuristic history. Now, he does in the book, he does have a vision connected with Sarah because he helps her find her wedding ring. So there's that piece of it. But why, when they're intimate, is it not? Does it not happen again? And the book doesn't really even address. Does it happen? Right? Does it happen?
I guarantee you, he went.
That is almost guaranteed. But
David,
I do
shoot
think
the shotgun blanks.
Fire that weapon. Damn the torpedo. Okay, so but in answer, I mean, my answer. In my answer to the question of which vision I find the most compelling, and so the vision itself, I'm going to mention both the film and book version, though they're different. For me, the one is his rescue of Chuck, his vision of the fire that will break out
in the film. In the book. Yeah, okay.
In the book, yes, in the book. Though also one of my favorite moments of the movie, performance-wise, or just how arresting it is when he, in the film, smashes the jars and just, I know it's a very Walken-esque thing to do the impression, but he's like, the ice is going to break, like, stop, and when he, so when he, the ice is going to break.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad we got that for posterity.
Classic.
He's so sick of my impression. I've just been doing it all day.
But going back to the book, because the book version is my favorite of it. I just love everything about it. I love he experiences this in a room full of people, not just in the film with the father and the son. He experiences it in a room full of people that begin to freak out because he has not done this in the entirety of his time tutoring Chuck, which has been for years. And so he's not done this. And then he's suddenly experiencing this vision. Chuck's freaking out. His girlfriend's freaking out. Everybody's like, we don't know what to do. The dad, Roger in the book, like just really impresses me that he's like, okay, let's drive out there. Let's check things out. And then Roger there's a really nice moment in the book, and I apologize that I'm spoiling part of this for you, Andy, but there's a really nice part of it in the book where the whole point is, hey, if you had a lightning rod on here, it would be fine. And the man says, of course we have lightning rods. They came by and they sold them to us and we put up the lightning rods. And as they're walking back to the car, it's Roger who looks back and notices, there's no lightning rod on that building. Like, he registers it. And so then later when he sees the newscast that shows, oh yeah, there was a fire that broke out. And of course that all culminates in him paying the medical bills, as I've mentioned a couple times now before. But I just find that all so compelling, because so many of the visions in the film are viewed as tragedies, and they're even, everything goes badly about his visions. It is nice in the book, beyond just the saving of with the fire situation. It is nice that the book has a legitimate, like, oh wow, this is a really compelling sort of rescue moment, as you will. So that's my pick.
Well, and
I'm
bursting. I think you've identified one of the strongest aspects to the book. I love the character of Roger in the book, and
Roger's great.
In part because how unexpected it was that he's on Johnny's side. Like, that feels, the movie version feels like the movie version of anything.
Right,
Pick something. It's the Hollywood version. Just, oh, we need another obstacle to throw in our character's path. Let's have him not believe him. And it just doesn't ring true for me in the way that the book version did. And also, Fear of God canon here, that feels to me like a very deliberate Ray Bradbury reference with the lightning rod salesman.
Oh, sure.
And
Something Wicked This Way Comes is referenced in the book
directly. Yeah. But so I wanted to just,
that's right.
That there. But this I guess just laying some scaffolding for where ultimately we might go. But in the book, let me juxtapose these things. I love how you read. I think you identified it as an almost episodic kind of structure, and that's fine. But I feel like it betrays a bit of the intentionality of the book's structure, because in the book it feels like the Bannerman, if ultimately the goal of choices made as a storyteller is to grow your character, right? Like to enhance their experience, not pure plot. The Bannerman exercise in the book feels like a character development piece for Johnny, because it certifies what he can do in a real world sense. So that's a big pin in the arc of this character. Why the Roger and Chuck story is so valuable to the character of Johnny is because it certifies that he can impact what he sees. Those are two very deliberate kind of tent poles that undergird and support the character of John Smith. And I think, one, just from a cinematic standpoint, a room full of kids stressing over a radio broadcast about the news of the fire is so strong. Right. But I don't know. I just love Johnny needs a win.
Yes.
And the character of Roger represents something we're not used to in this kind of genre storytelling, which is you made an interesting point that he doesn't necessarily even believe to the letter what Johnny's saying, but he's willing to take a chance on him, and that matters.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it becomes fuel for that character of John.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just really wanted to echo the support for Roger, who even when that actor came on screen and they reference him as Roger, I was like, oh, that's he's like the visual definition of kind of not what I picture of the Roger in the book. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I understand. No, I understand. So maybe one more little sort of more lighthearted question, although it doesn't have to be a lighthearted answer, before we get into deeper thematic waters. The question is, would you want Johnny to touch your hand? Because it hasn't been mentioned yet. Let me set it up because it hasn't been mentioned. There's a moment in the book and in the film when he's got a press conference because he identified the fire and everything. And then they've got the press conference there, and a reporter bullies his way in and is like, give me a reading, like do something. He's clearly very skeptical. But then Johnny opens the door of like, hit this reporter's sister, OD'd, and in the film she apparently committed suicide. And so there's all these layers of family troubles and trauma that Johnny unpacks. And immediately following that, many people, and there's one reporter in particular when Johnny's like, I didn't mean to hurt him. And then this one reporter is like, yeah. Everybody could see that he was asking for it. Everybody could see he was asking for it. Don't touch me. Don't like, and he's very much like, no, you stay away from me. So my question on the table is, would you want Johnny to touch you? And if not, then why not? And if so, what would you want to find out, or what would you be most afraid to find out? That's the perhaps lighthearted, doesn't have to be lighthearted answer, but you know. So would you want to avoid Johnny and shaking Johnny's hand like the plague, or would it freak you out very much if he touched you? So for this one, I'm not going to call on anybody. I'm gonna ask for volunteers as tribute. So does anybody? Okay, Andy, go ahead. Andy, go.
There you go.
I just with everything that I have going on, I wouldn't mind him touching me to help me unearth some of my mental stuff that I'm dealing with. I think that it would help with therapy. If I knew some of the roots of some of the stuff, instead of having to explore and go through. So to make it deep, the lighthearted question, I think it would be I think it would be helpful for me if he saw that vision, because apparently that reporter, that was something that really messed with him, and you could tell his visceral, that's a big word, guys, reaction of pulling away and just having that come up. I think it would be helpful for some things. Just imagine him being a therapist and just saying caution to the wind, but I can read you and help you find the root of some of the things that you're struggling with. So
yeah, nope, I understand. Anybody else, gentlemen?
One, I really love that response, Andy. That was very that vulnerability is very appreciated, and I'm torn, truthfully. I mean, I guess it kind of depends. The movie, for the most part, depicts pretty intense stuff that he's seeing in response to the contact he makes. But, at the same time, I was having a conversation recently about just, as we can tend to do on these Quarterly Kings, getting a little raw, just some desire for some clarity and I understand the road is made by walking. In my deepest of spirit selves, my more surface material self sometimes says, well, screw that. I want to see the road, and I want to know the path before me in a more tactile, concrete sense. I feel like I've seen and read enough genre material, a la The Monkey's Paw, to know we'd be careful what we ask for, but I also can see the value on a real just human comfort level of some measure of clarity, whether it's vocationally or a family member's well-being, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I'm pretty 50-50 on that one, Lackey. I don't
Understood. Ian, go ahead.
As am I, because there's an unpredictability to what comes to surface, right? So, Andy, I love your answer. I want to echo like what you said. I would love to plumb the unseen depths of my own self. Like, what is it that feeds what is going on now that I myself don't even understand? So there's nothing that Johnny could reveal like to the world about me that frightens me anymore. But the case of that reporter, right? Like, it's interesting that it's not just that he comes in contact with a person and now knows what will happen to, sometimes it's what will happen to you, but sometimes it's just that you are the link in a chain and this is what's going to happen to this person, right? Or with Dr. W, like, your mother's alive. I saw her escape, right? So I guess what could unsettle me might be like just seeing what did it look like in the home life of my family when I was a little kid? What did it look like for that brief glimmer where my parents were married? Because the vast majority of my life, that has not been the reality. It's weirder for me to try to imagine a time when they were. I'm so accustomed to they're not.
Yeah.
And I know them both, right? But there's so much I don't know. What transpired in it, and I'm not even saying anything overtly dark and wicked. I just mean, what was that dynamic like? What did they think about me? A human being that they're suddenly responsible for.
Right.
Did they plan on it? Were they excited? I would hope for the grace to be able to take whatever is revealed, but the thought of that unsettles me.
Yeah, no, I understand. Blake, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm torn as well. It's a little bit of a cliche whenever you talk about becoming your parents. And, no one wants to, because, whenever you're thinking about that cliche, you're thinking about all the worst parts of your parents. But then there's elements of it, like, for instance, my dad, there's a world in which I fall on the same trajectory as him with his disease. So is there a world in which I choose to be touched by Johnny, and he basically gives me the death sentence?
Right.
It's always in the back of my head. Always
death or best?
Yes, death sentence. Yeah. It's always in the back of my head, but I'm usually pretty good at repressing that thought.
Yeah, I understand.
And so, in one level, you could say that it would be nice to know, so I could find acceptance and seek contentment in the life that's been given to me. But who knows how that kind of information actually affects the person?
Right.
Like that's my fear. Is I think ultimately I could intellectually say, like, I'm okay with knowing the result. But psychologically speaking, who knows if I'm actually prepared for that?
Right.
And so, like, it's 50-50. Like everyone, like these two have been saying as well. It's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways.
No, absolutely.
Like it's nice to know how you're going to go out in order to embrace what you've got right now. But the unintended consequences are the scary part.
Right. And I think for myself, and maybe this is a blending of what others have said. Maybe this is just sort of a concluding thesis statement. But I feel like for myself, you might classify me as torn as well, because if it was a matter of knowing the future, my answer is no. I don't need to know what's coming. We'll just enter the future, unknown, uncharted. We will make the road by walking. If it is a matter, as Andy has expressed and as a couple of others have said, like, if it's a window into clarity for myself, knowing myself more, understanding myself better, I would embrace that. I would recognize this might be painful work, this might be difficult work, but I would embrace that. If it's a matter of it's and this is not intending to be like a big side subject, but a lot of the subject right now, when people think of in the Christian church and people talk about prophecy or the prophetic, I think a lot of people visualize that as kind of the baptized version of fortune telling. Oh, so you're going to prophesy over me. You're going to tell me what's coming. Next year is going to be my year. Blessing, glory, all that. When actually, biblically speaking, though there were prophetic utterances that later came to pass and were fulfilled and could be referenced back, particularly with the coming of Christ, though those things could be pointed to, a lot of times prophetic messages were for clarification of the now. This is for, I'm going to speak and cut through the fog of what you are all, getting yourselves worked up about, cut right to the heart of the matter and speak prophetically into it to say, no, this is who you are. And this is what is happening right now. If
I can jump in there, to your point, though, I mean, we have the benefit of saying the coming of Christ was prophesied in the person of Jesus, but what we're all dancing around here is all of this is interpretive too. And there were plenty of people in his present moment who were like, whatever. No, he's not.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Which I just think is what is at the heart of the concern with a character like a Johnny.
Yes, of course.
We crave that knowledge and fear it's revealing as well.
No, absolutely. So this next piece, I had a question that fundamentally I'm going to put it on the table, but this is the portion, little over, an hour 15 into our conversation. This is the portion of the discussion where we're going to intentionally dive into some deeper waters. This is a thematically very interesting and very complex book. So with the utterance of my question, my formal roundtable is concluded. And this will instead, you can respond to the question or use the question to pivot other considerations of theme that might have danced up as you watched the film or as you read the book. So the question is, there's a couple of primary ethical dilemmas that are raised by the premise of the dead zone. And the first ethical dilemma is, should you intervene when you have foreknowledge? Should you speak a thing that you know is going to happen to influence the outcome of it? And fiction has danced with this question for centuries. But should you intervene if you have foreknowledge? The secondary question to that is, should you intervene if intervention means doing something that would otherwise be deemed unethical, immoral, wrong? Where does that flavor the intervention as such? Because for listeners who have no idea what the dead zone is about or anything, Johnny sees these visions. We keep referencing Greg Stilson. Greg Stilson is an up-and-coming politician who, when Johnny touches his hand, he sees a revelation that Greg Stilson will be president one day. And when he becomes president, he will start the ultimate nuclear war, and it will devastate all of creation. And so Johnny sees his only imperative, knowing this, to attempt to assassinate Greg Stilson, which understandably is a very ethically complex consideration. And so that's, again, I emphasize this heartily. You could respond to that directly, or if there was an alternate thematic consideration that you thought was worth unpacking, feel free to do that as well. And this is also the moment where I would feel a bit remiss, like calling on somebody. So if anybody has anything burning that they'd like to kind of unpack, then please, by all means, just sort of chime in, jump in. Everybody's looking at each other. Andy, you want to go?
Andrew's on it.
Go ahead.
Man, I thought about this when in the movie, this scene in the movie, where he's talking to Dr. W, and you think about where we are right now. I can barely remember the community that we were in when 9/11 happened. I remember where I was and what was doing, but I was in 9th grade, and I didn't see the bigger picture of America coming together. And America, I've read about it. I think I remember certain things, but where we are currently, would I change the tides of who is in power right now with the state of things, with people, coming out and realizing that their voice matters, and standing in polls for hours, and doing that, are people realizing that minimum wage isn't covering it, or there are complete racial injustices going on that didn't become apparent to us until this year. Some of us it had, but it didn't become a news story until this year. I don't know if I would change that. I wish it would be sooner. I wish we could solve all the hurt before it happened, but through the hurt, I feel there's the healing that's occurring. There's the healing of realizing, that people have a voice, that people of color have a voice, that LGBT people have a voice. I mean, even recently when we're recording this, the Pope comes out and blesses civil unions, between same-sex couples. And that's huge. That's huge, whether what side of the fence that you side on. I'm not going to get into that, but that these issues are finally coming out. And I mean, would I go back and change, just using the Pope, for example, would I go out and change his, view on that? I don't think so. I think it's a much needed. Would I go and change who's in power? Yeah, I would, but it's such a hard time, and COVID is so hard. And I don't want to take away from the deaths that are occurring and the hurt that is occurring to America and the families that are affected by it. And please don't hear me saying that. Please don't hear me saying that it's not a bad situation. But I've spent more time with my family. I've spent more time in books going through, systematic racism than I ever would have. I've studied more theology. I've slowed down. I've had the time. I've had my manic episode and spent some time in the hospital, but I was able to slow down. Just being a little bit more vulnerable. Is I was in a psych ward for 6 days, and nobody could visit me, and because of COVID, and I had time to just be with my thoughts and to just calm down. And I don't think I would have had that time if this wasn't going on. And so I don't know. I don't wish this on anybody, the COVID, or to people to get it or anything. But it's a time where I think people are getting a lot of clarity, or some people are. I would say 70% of people around us are getting a lot of clarity of what really matters. And I think that's so important. And I don't know if I would change that.
Well,
I'm sorry, something's kind of burning. I apologize, Nathan. So first of all,
that's decked out.
Andy, first of all, thank you again for
your
continued honesty and vulnerability. We cherish it. So a parable that Jesus told that has come up on the show before, and that has become, as many of the parables have, become of significant resonance to me for its implications, is a parable of the wheat and the weeds, or as they're called in the scriptures, of the tares, Tares. And the parable goes as such, that the farmer sowed good seed, and in the middle of the night, an enemy came out and sowed bad seed on top of the good one. And so then when the growth began to break ground, and they realized, like, oh man, there are all of these weeds interspersed, or tares interspersed throughout this wheat. And they ask the landowner, they say, should we pull up these weeds? And his response back to them says, no, because if you do that, you will damage the wheat. So do not pull up the weeds, because if you do, you'll damage the wheat. He said, rather wait until harvest time. And when harvest time comes, we will separate the wheat from the weeds. We'll separate the good from the bad. And so in the process, as I take it, and what I reflect on when I hear what you talk about, Andy, is we are in a season right now, and this is, I cannot remember where, but this is an expression that I have made on the show before. We are in a time right now where, if you layer on what I take away from that parable of the wheat and the weeds, we are in a time where the good is going to get better and the bad is going to get worse. They are both going to grow together. That means the bad is going to be the worst we've ever seen it, and the good, don't forget, may be some of the best we've ever seen it, some of the most inspiring, some of the most important, some of the most vital. And while the bad is getting worse, there can be a tendency to be like, pluck up the bad, ruin it, but we don't realize that if we do it in a way that is too disruptive or too dismissive or too reductive, then we will damage the good that is progressing alongside with it. And we must be discerning and conscious of making sure that we are right-minded in the way we respond to the bad seeds that have been thrust upon so many good things. So not only am I, championing and thanking and praising you for your vulnerability, but also echoing to a large degree and affirming. That's very much where my heart sort of centers around. God, if I could please get rid of the bad, please, I don't want to think about the bad anymore. But knowing and recognizing that upending the bad is going to do damage, perhaps irreparably, to the good things that are progressing and the things that are coming to light. And you mentioned so many movements that are on the forefront of people finding their voice. God, we can't stymie that. We can't stop that. And we have to allow this time to continue to let. And maybe that's the hardest part about it, because the book comes to a different conclusion. Johnny comes to a different conclusion. But maybe in order to let the good get better, we have to have a degree of accepting the bad as it gets worse. And I'm not saying we don't try to influence in appropriate manner. For God's sake, this is airing on election day. Make your voice heard, make your voice known, do what is within your power to affect and influence things. But along the way, recognize that it does us very little good to look back with profound regret and spite and say, like, oh yeah, I wish all that bad had just been plucked up, because so much good would have been lost in its wake. That's my soapbox kind of stepped on and stepped right off quickly. I want to allow the other three.
Well, I want us all to be on these soapboxes, because give me some room, boys. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But Andrew, I want to just with full heart affirm and encourage and welcome and express gratitude to all that you've shared there, because something I've thought about lately is, this time, and Reed, thank you for that scriptural imagery. Like, in this season, I want to fortify me, right? I want to fortify me. I want to understand the nuance with which I say this. I want to make me stronger so that my grace and compassion will overflow into the areas that it needs. And something that the reason I am neutral to kind of negative on the movie versus the book is the book sung out to me in a very particular way as an exercise in catharsis. It is to me, it was almost King using this meta narrative of I mean, goodness gracious, the man's name is John Smith. It's the most generic name in the American male book of baby names. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, it says something to me that it's a blank slate. You're meant to almost sort of see how you feel about this wretched person and and meditate on how you would react. And so to me, it's this meta sort of example of catharsis writ large, which is, when I see crooked and lying and corrupt politicians exercising their power in simply the vain pursuit of more power, I want to feel, this gives me my release, right? Now, there are healthy forms of fortifying oneself, but the act of comprehending and thinking about the dead zone is so that I'm like, okay, thank you, Uncle Stevie. Got that feeling out of the way and can move on into richer, better. But, I think about this is kind of new for me, thinking about the fear of God and what we do here in this way. And I'm going to loosely use a sports metaphor here, which is a really bad choice a lot of the times. But I think about what we do here on a given episode is almost like being in the locker room. And we're trying to psych ourselves up, being able to name amongst each other, this is the thing you're up against. We're exercising in this room. We're practicing. We're learning, okay, these are the feelings that are going to come at you. These are the things that are going to try to scare you. These are the things that are going to try to frighten you. These are the things that are going to try to convince you that you're going to lose things that you love. Okay, and we learn and we talk to each other and we preach at each other and we prophesy to each other and we uplift and encourage each other in here so that we know how to deal with those things out there. Mm-hmm. And to me, the dead zone is such a pitch perfect example of that. And I think about, and I would not have been able to do this if not for our work on the fear of God. Recently, I encountered a peer online. These are not great spaces to try to fortify oneself or others. I can own that. but it's someone I've known for a long time. We have a history of some engagement like this. They posted this meme of a prominent candidate, and the attachment they had to it, their editorial, not the meme itself, their personal editorial was all Christians should be afraid of X, of this thing happening. And I called him out, and I said, this is unchristlike and you should take it down. And some peer in his group, which I knew was going to happen, jumped on me. And yes, this is the space, this is a safe space where I can toot my own horn a little bit. But the guy was like, well, you don't know Jesus and the Spirit and the such and such and such and such. And I said, I know what the Spirit does, and I know who Jesus is. And Jesus spends much of his time telling us not to be afraid. And thus, if you are trying to tell people to be afraid of a thing, specifically Christians, you are being unchristlike and should not do that.
Yes.
But I wouldn't have the self knowledge, the knowledge of Christ in me, the knowledge of the Christ image that is meant to dispel fear in the world, if not for the work we do here and the ability to recognize, I know I'm not supposed to be a John Smith, but my human self sometimes craves this diffusion of that energy. And so I read the Dead Zone, or I watch the Dead Zone, like, okay.
Right.
It's our version of yoga, is watching something like the Dead Zone, so that I can go out in the world at peace and in calm spirit, but also naming those things that are actively trying to engender fear in the name of some screwed up, skewed, false, fake moralism, which is anything but God.
No. Amen. Ian, Blake, you've probably been sitting there simmering, the pot like ready to boil.
Do you want to go, Blake?
Go for it.
Okay.
The ice.
The ice is gonna break.
The ice has broken. Nathan is broken and on fire.
Oh.
My mind is kind of orbiting 2 points, and you have a double halved question, and you've already invoked the wheat and the tares, which I think is such an important,
amazing.
Well, and it is, and one aspect of it that I find fascinating is that the master in the parable knows that the servants cannot tell the difference between the wheat and the weeds. So that they're like, why don't we go pull up the weeds? And he's saying, look, if you do, you're going to pull up the whole field. No, there won't be anything left, because you did. At this stage, you can't even tell the difference between the two. You're not competent for that.
That's so good.
So we're going to let it all come out. We're going to let it all come out, and then we'll know. And that's frightening, because my misgiving that I have right now, I could be wrong. And I have to wait to see, like, this is a terrible thing.
Yes, right.
Also, the coexistence of the two. And that was the point that you were stressing, that there is some sense where I don't even have this good apart from this bad that is sprouting up at the exact same time.
Right.
And I guess one thing I want to say into that is, one of the things that I love about, let's just say the Dead Zone, whether it's the novel or the movie, is learning to live with what is. And it ain't ideal. And the ideal ain't even on the table. It might be in your mind, but you're not living in it. And you don't have the option of choosing it. All there is living in light of what is in fact the case, or living in denial. And I think that was something, I loved how Andy put it. My experience in Minneapolis was exacerbated because the school of which I was a part, the theology there, baptized whatever was, everything that is good. However painful it is, however terrible it is, God stands directly behind all of these things as its true cause. Never mind that means that God is a terrible, abusive father then, right? Yes, a despot who will beat you into recognizing how good you've got it, you know.
Hug that cactus again.
I was gonna say it. You beat me to it. I was gonna say hug the cactus.
You gotta let go of the cactus. You're hurting yourself.
Fire the blanks, David.
So what I struggled with for a while was in recognizing wheat and tares in that.
Yeah, right.
And this was a major conversational point with my wife during our time just now this past weekend in Minneapolis. Where we are now, individually and together, does not obtain. It isn't real. It wasn't possible without just abject terror, dread, wanting to die. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't make those good things. Mm-hmm. Those are awful things to undergo.
Yeah.
And God doesn't give me a dose of that, like, hey, here is crippling depression and isolation, and it's because I love you so much. So here you go. It's what happened, and God does not love me for having allowed that to transpire. But the way he stands behind that is not the way that I was being told that he does. Mm-hmm. What he's in the and I've said this before, I'm not trying to just repeat myself, but his business card says that he is in the business of bringing good out of evil.
Mm-hmm. Can I?
You may.
Okay.
Do it.
Because what you're calling to mind is, you know, the philosophy you're laying out there is saying, hey, the tares are good too.
Yes.
Which is utter hell spawned falsehood.
Right.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
Instead, and Reed, we've come up with this before. I hate repeating myself. I love repeating myself. But I don't love a bumper sticker here. But it's not that these things are good. They're not. They're abject garbage. But we include them and forgive them. And this is how we operate in the world. It is there, and it is a thing. If you pull it out, you pull out everything. So we don't pull it out. We let it be because it needs to not run its course. That's too.
It does because it doesn't run its course. Terrible produces terrible. So it doesn't run its course and then turn into good. What God does is make good sprout out of the grave of this thing. So bad things die, and that's it. What they produce is more death, misery, ruin, distortion, degradation.
Right.
Okay? They don't produce good anything.
Right. No,
what God does is subvert all of that and say, here's what's going to happen. And that is why, so overall, we don't have to feel guilty about owning good things that have come about during COVID time. Mm-hmm. COVID is terrible. Mm-hmm. Over 210,000 dead Americans is terrible. Mm-hmm. There's no changing that. It's not a blessing in disguise.
No.
But Andrew isn't lying when he describes good that has sprung up out of that same soil with these abjectly terrible things. And I feel like, you know, we've invoked the word prophecy, and as you beautifully put it, yes, there can be a predictive element, but it's often a forthtelling, like, this is what's going on. You can't make it out.
Right.
But this is what is the case. Mm-hmm. And what happens in the dead zone is that Johnny, if we just want to use the parallel of prophecy, I would just say that besides prediction, prophecy helps us to see the jagged parts fit into one frame.
Oh, yeah.
Because on the plane itself, my perspective is twofold. I see nothing but the splintering, nothing but the brokenness, nothing but the hurtful, jagged edges. They're hurting me every moment. But prophecy can discern these fit together. Things are in their place. They may not all be in their right place, but there is a cohesion to this thing.
Yeah.
And there is an end to it in both senses. There's an end because the bad will have an end. There will be an end to the bad, to the bad, but also end as in the telos. What is the outcome? And it ain't the natural outcome. And that's what I was trying to stress. Bad doesn't produce good. Bad produces bad.
Right.
But why is the bad allowed to continue? Because it's going to manure the soil of the creation, and good will blossom out of that supernaturally, not because of anything the bad wants to make happen, not because of the inner DNA dynamics of what bad is.
Right.
And that's why I love that Johnny Smith ultimately can say, I need to stop running. I need to stop hiding. That's actually what I've been doing this entire time. What I had identified as a curse, it is a gift.
Yeah.
And again, I just rewatched this coming back from Minneapolis, a place that I at one time had hoped I would never set foot in again.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, Minneapolis wasn't good. It was bad. It was very bad.
Yes.
But I can't imagine the good that I have now apart from it.
Coming out of that. Right.
Is it a curse? It felt like it. But I don't think the gift is possible without it.
Yeah. So okay. I need to let Blake speak because Blake's been kind and patient, but I've expressed this on the show before too. Listeners are going to get sick of hearing me repeat things that I've said.
It's election day. We're repeating our messages to bring you home, to bring you to your decision point.
So I've expressed on the show before a frustration that I have when people talk about like, well, I had to go through that bad thing, or I had to do that bad thing because, God knew that was the only way to get me from, from A to B and then all the way up to Z. And that kind of theological understanding really frustrates me a lot, because exactly what you were talking about, Ian, is like, well, then you're talking about God as if he's a sadist who just sort of births these wicked things to come and wreak havoc into your life so that then all of these other things can happen. That's not the case. My theological framework that I've adopted is we keep talking about prevention, of preventing bad things from happen, when I believe in a God of redemption. And I believe in a God of restoration. And I believe that God is so good at redeeming and restoring. And I believe that he is so profoundly good at making all things new that he will put such a thing in such a way that when you look back on it, you will see no other path possible. It wasn't that God meant for those things to happen. He's just that good at spinning things around and at restoring and at redeeming and at bringing things up. He's just that good. And he's so good, in point of fact, that you will not see any other way in which it could have been. And that is what, and that is what I think of when Christ himself is even asking the question in the garden, where he's like, is there any other way possible? That's what we wrestle with, right? Is this it? Is this the only way? Right. And he doesn't get an answer to the question. He just continues to progress forward towards the cross. And it is in that ultimate act, and there's so many different things that could be unpacked in that conversation, but in that ultimate act, he doesn't get an answer to the question of, is there any other way? He simply faithfully marches towards the cross, and then, of course, to the tomb, and then, of course, to Resurrection Day, because I deeply believe that whatever it is that has come before, whatever it is that has devastated us, that does not one iota change the redemptive power and the redemptive potential that God and Christ have to speak new, fresh life, restorative life into where you are right now, rearrange the DNA of whatever situation it is, and restore from this point forward. And perhaps in such a way that we would foolishly look back and say, well, surely I had to go through all of that nonsense, when in point of fact, no, you probably didn't, but God is just that good. Blake, I'm sorry, I'm gonna let you talk. You've been really, really patient.
I love it.
You can
love it.
You can censor what I'm about to say out. I mean, how do I follow up any of that? Like, exactly.
Here he is, ladies and gentlemen.
No pressure.
Yeah. So, yeah. The one thing that was coming to mind as y'all were talking, man, some beautiful points across the board. Thank y'all. The one thing that I remember is as I watched and read The Dead Zone, there's one image in my head that came to mind, and that's Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer, who himself was involved in exactly the thing that is at the core of this novel and this movie. And just like Johnny Smith, he fails. And yet it wasn't dependent on him to actually complete the task. Like, he was faithful. He did what he felt was right, whether it was right or wrong. He understood grace. He understood that his choices would be made, and he would know in time if they were wheat or tares, but he made a choice, and it was ultimately a failure. Just like Johnny, he didn't actually accomplish what he set out to do. And in my head, like, that's living the faithful life, is recognizing that it's not on you to change the world, to save the world, but to influence where you can influence. Because I mean, you think about Christopher Walken, Johnny Smith, the embattled nature of what he's going through in that decision. It's not an easy decision. It's not a decision any of us want to be in the midst of.
And as an insertion there, to not to derail you, but to reinforce that, in the book, it's very explicit about what this is doing to him physically.
Yes,
and
exactly.
That's really powerful.
That's true.
Yeah, there's a suffering involved. Like, and it's taking a toll. It's taking a cost. And I think that is weirdly turning a lot of what we've said on its head and saying that suffering, like these tears, are not good. But there is a faithful suffering that brings fruit, that rises from the grave. And so that's so tough to parse out, because you're walking a thin line in saying that. So,
Well,
go ahead.
Well, and that's what you're asking, Reed, like, is it right to take a preventative measure that is ostensibly immoral? And like, Christian ethics doesn't admit of an answer that just like fits, like, yes, it is, right? It like, and that is why wisdom is frustrating, because sometimes, and sometimes no. And we want it to just be like, can you just give me a yes or no?
It's the law.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But you have to like take a lot of time to get wise, because you're not automatically wise. I'm a dummy. And God is so good that I can only look back and see it had to be this way. And in a Flannery O'Connor sense, like, I need grace to knock me upside this stubborn, thick dome.
Right.
Because wisdom is not my strong suit. Or like, I love y'all, but like, it doesn't come natural. It's not your inheritance.
Sure.
It's not yours. You only accumulate it by clawing your way through intensely difficult things that do not always have clear-cut answers. And only on that basis then can you tell Bonhoeffer, like, I don't know what else there is to do. Right? Or
it's gotta work.
the Jewish midwives, like, well, I know we're not supposed to lie, but I mean, they're going to kill our babies, like, whatever scenario you want to think of, we're bending the normal rules that you would say, like, these are right. And you train your kids, like, don't lie. But you have to be prepared in these scenarios to say, okay, but now you have to. I mean, I don't know if y'all know this, but sometimes there's not a right answer.
Right.
There's just not like a right answer.
We keep seeking. No, you go ahead, Ian.
I was just going to say, like, I think that the best approach to take is an Augustinian one, where it's like, look, man, okay, like I was saying earlier about learning to live with what is. Like, look, ideal ain't on the table. So if you ask me, what is Augustinian thought as a whole? Like, what springs from Augustine on that has shaped our theological inheritance? It's asking, it's rather recognizing that the question that needs to be asked sometimes is, what's the least bad thing that I can do? Because sometimes what we go to is like, oh, what's the best thing I can do? Like, hey man, you're not even capable of that. So what's the least bad thing you can do?
Yeah.
What's the least damaging and stupid thing that you're capable of right now?
What a sucky question.
Well, so we keep seeking at minimal a binary, good, bad, yes, no, right, wrong. And most often we want to dig our heels in on a singularity. This is the thing. This is the one singular truth. To rattle around something else that's been dancing in my imagination recently is when the disciples saw the blind man outside of the city and they said, who sinned?
Right.
This man or his parents that he was born blind, which is a really stupid question to ask if he sinned that he was born blind. That's a really dumb question. But that,
Come on, brother Lucky.
But what they were asking, what they were after is what's a root cause? What's a root cause analysis of all this bad that's going on in the world? What's all this travesty? What can we point our finger at and say it's your fault? It's your fault. It's this problem. It's that thing. And you know what we need? We need a little bit more of this, or we need a little bit more of that. And what Christ speaks into that is he says your question ultimately, and I'm of course paraphrasing scripture, which is treacherous territory. But what Christ speaks into that is he says, your question is misguided and irrelevant. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. This happened so that the glory of the Lord could be shown in him. And does that mean that God caused the blindness? No, theological turds, stop that. Okay, that's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying.
Wow.
It doesn't
Love
mean
it.
that God causes all this thing. It just means like everything that we've been saying. There's a lot of bad right now. There's a lot of awful going on, and some of it may bend you to the point of breaking, and some of it may devastate you to the point of utter destruction. There's a lot of bad going on right now, but in the midst of all of that, you can spend a lot of your time looking backwards and wondering why in the hell this happened to begin with, or you can turn your face forward towards the God who still has the power to redeem, still has the power to rescue, still has the power to restore, still has the power to save, and still has the power for some mysterious way or through some mysterious means to bring goodness and faithfulness out of that, despite how long this man has been born blind, or despite how long this thing has been traversing. We keep rattling ourselves around stupid questions, trying to figure out how to prevent root causes, instead of recognizing the kingdom is at hand. It's here. The word became flesh, and it put its dwelling among us. We are not about the business of the embodiment of it. We're trying to analyze it to pieces. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to get all of those spider web concoctions together, which is why we didn't bring it up, Andy. You mentioned it earlier, is why the mother is so conspiracy theory laden. She's like, oh, I'm going to give money to this, faith healer and buy this cloth and put it under Johnny's bed. And I'm going to do, all of these other things that I'm going to do. I'm going to find the root cause of this, and I'm going to find the solution. When in point of fact, all of us wrestle around and try to do that. You can see it in the myriad of conspiracy theories that bounce up in the church world, in the political world, in the social world, all this other stuff. You can see it just reproducing like rabbits all over the place. When in point of fact, from my mind, the prophetic path, the Christian path, the faithful path is to say, you know what, all of this is largely irrelevant in the face of a God who, when he shines his light upon it, all of them are burned away and all of them are washed away, and everything is include and forgive. And here he stands before you saying, oh, where are your accusers? I'm just throwing all of the scriptural metaphors in there. But, he says, where are your accusers to the woman caught in adultery, who, technically speaking, might have been right in their accusation of her needing to be stoned. But he's like, where are your accusers? And she says, I can't find them anywhere. Well, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. That's the faithfulness, not this whole like, hey, uncover all of this deep root, uncover all of these, these myriad of conspiracy theories. Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? That's irrelevant. That is largely, and pull up the weeds. That is largely and wholly irrelevant. What is relevant is, okay, am I turning my heart and my mind towards faithfulness? Am I bending my spirit towards this is what is right and good, so therefore this is the path I will walk, even if that path leads me to the cross and to the tomb, because beyond that there is something more. And that is, sorry to have gotten so passionate on all of y'all, but that is
no apologies necessary.
What you do.
That is
It's election. It's a big day.
And that is it's not absent, because I've heard it among dreadfully few, but I've heard it among some of my friends. I've heard it from all four of you, and I've heard it from a couple of other of my church friends, but I will say by and large, it is dreadfully absent from primary Christian voices in speaking into these times today. It is dreadfully absent and missing this prophetic hope that says, yeah. Seek all your answers, chase the wind, and tell me when you've caught it. But meanwhile, we will continue to make the road by walking and continue to tread faithfully upon the path that has been set before us until such time as our time is concluded or the fullness of time is concluded. I think I'm spent. I think I'm done. My bookcase is
Word
made.
of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So okay. I would be remiss if I didn't say it. If anybody has anything, your bones burning within you to say, then I invite you to do so. Otherwise, we can pivot to the fog meter and wind things down. But I don't want to cut off anybody if you got something rattling in there. You're like, I cannot leave this conversation without saying this. Y'all ready to go to the fog meter?
Give me a second.
Fog meter.
Andy's like, all right, we will give you your time, Andy.
I think I'm echoing what you guys are saying. I think I am, but yeah. I just after meeting the people that I've met through my time at college as an older student and meeting or being friends with the younger students who, I went to Cambodia I was the oldest besides the teacher, and seeing them rise up and fight, like they'll fight for veganism, they'll fight for and Nathan's face. I would just be, if I didn't say it, it's just what if we can't find the cause? Like why are we looking for a cause when we can just make the change? Maybe that's me thinking, that's me thinking out loud. That's me, saying it, like, for example, I love my wife. She's great. I don't know why I said that, but but she has a lot of anxiety because she sees the sickest children that you can see because she works in the PICU, and so she brings that home. And I see that with Milo when she thinks he should be on a timetable of he should be standing and walking now. What is the cause of him not? And he's 14 months, it takes some time. Some of you are parents or soon to be parents. But there could be no cause that he's not walking now beyond it's just not time, And so I just think it's just, I just have to say is like, we look so much for the cause instead of just going out and just going forth, and what Reed was talking about with the redemption and with the saving grace of God is, and with the blind man, what is the cause of him being blind? Who gives a crap? Let's let him see.
That's the New Living Translation.
Yeah. Who gives a crap?
Yeah.
That's Eugene Peterson, I think.
Golly, though, like the way you just phrased that was so great. Let's let him see. Go ahead, Nathan. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, no, all I was going to say is that's kind of maybe a bow on what Andy's saying, but echoing where I was feeling after Reed finished of like, I think a lot, Reed, about the missed conversation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it can't be, it's not lost on me that, the title of this book, the space that it invokes, the dead zone. Like, now in the text, it's a unphysical spaced idea more than anything, but we we walk through our own dead zone in a kind of literal sense sometimes. And you know, and the other kingism there, we walk through the mist. Like to ask the question, what is the cause? Yes, does have a bit of fruitlessness to it. And I think, you know, there's medical, what is the cause? And then there's spiritual, what is the cause? Medical, what is the cause is, yeah, sometimes we need to diagnose the thing to figure out how to treat it. But spiritual, what is the cause is often, forgive the redundancy, a lost cause, because that's not the point. That's not the question at hand.
Right.
The question at hand is, how are you going to live in the midst?
Yeah, of course.
And you're either going to be enmeshed with the tares, or you're going to fortify yourself as wheat. And I don't know. That's it's in many ways, though, for those craving certainty in life, a disappointing answer. It's in many ways, to me, the most faithful one, which is, I love this notion of, and why I reject the reductive nature of simply, well, you know, you can't have protesters breaking the law. I'm like, what a stupid reductive thought to have, because of, you know, kind of some of the verbiage you were using, Ian, of just like law. We don't operate in that realm, you know.
Right.
Our goal is to bring life systemically where possible, individually and corporately most times. But more often than not, that's still going to be walking through a fog and walking through a dead zone to try to bring life with you. Anyway, I won't force a button.
Dragging life, kicking and screaming sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think we'll wind it down there. We're going to go to the fog meter, and as we are prone to do on the Quarterly Kings, we might do this slightly different. I'm going to ask, and Andy, you can excuse yourself from part of this question if you want to, or you can answer part of the question. I'm going to ask, when you give your fog meter, that you give for the fog meter is our very specific metric of fear and God on all the material that we cover, its scares and its substance. I'm going to invite each of you, as I call on you, to give a fear measurement and a God measurement to both the film and the book, respectively. That's why I say, Andrew, if you want to excuse yourself from the book, you can, or if you want to reflect on what you've read so far and have that be your answer, that's also acceptable as well. So let's start with fear. Let's start with the fear measurement. Again, give me a measurement for the book and for the film out of 10. So I'm going to start with the fear measurement on the book level. I think the book does a much better job of sort of connecting the threads, as we've already said, and of creating this really sort of existential push and pull that you have against profound evil and how we should respond to it. That having been said, it's not terribly nightmarish. I'm going to give the book a 6 on the fog meter out of 10. I'm going to give the film a 5 out of 10. I'm going to go next to Andy.
I'm going to give the book 5. I haven't read all of it, but it's just echoing our conversation. It's what I expect. And I'm going to give the movie a 4, just because I just the book is better.
Yeah, no, I understand. Okay. Ian, you're up.
I'm going to give the book a 4 for fear. Just not a lot of scares. I mean, stuff that gets under your skin, stuff that makes you sweat as you think, what would I do? Sure. But, and by having more of, you know, Johnny in his coma state, drifting about, there's just more there. And so I give the movie 3.
Okay. All right. Nathan, you're up.
It may be overly generous, I think, for the sake of the book, because I do like that it's wrestling with the existential notion, exemplified when more organically than it does in the movie, the question circles the atmosphere and the text of the book of, if you could kill Hitler, what would you do? Like that question's been asked since that happened. And and the book makes an argument on its own for kind of wrestling through that. So from an existential standpoint, I think it's strong, but still, yeah, very sparse on truly scary aspects to it. So I'll give the book a generous 5, the movie a tepid 3.
Okay. And Blake, round us home on the fear meter.
So I'm gonna be the weirdo, of course, because it's what I do. It's the trash panda, the fire starter. Yeah. So if I think about the book and in the way what that's been mentioned so far is that you see from the very beginning these two characters, Stillson and Smith, converging. You see it from the very beginning. Yeah. You know, at some point this is gonna collide. Mm-hmm. So on that level, like, actually, I think that actually kills a lot of the fear for me. Whereas the film doesn't give you that really until the second half of the movie.
Sure, yeah.
So this is actually who we're concerned about. Mm-hmm. So on some level, I'm going to actually say that the book is going to be a solid 5.
Okay.
Existential dread purely, because there's really not a whole lot of nightmarish imagery outside of visions and whatnot. But the existential dread for me of the movie is going to be about a 6. I think it's actually more terrifying for me. So
yeah, I gotcha. Well, we'll go backwards then. So Blake, what would you give for God? Again, for both film and movie.
10 and 10.
Oh, 10 and 10. Nice. All right. So Nathan, what would you give it for the God meter, book and film?
I'm going to give the book an 8.5. I think I just really fell in love with what it felt like the book was after and really got on that 1.5 speed wavelength. I had a very strong, disheartenment attached to the watching of the film, having read the book so recently. I feel like the movie abandons a lot of the thematic heft in favor of box checking, and so from that standpoint, I'm gonna give it a tepid 4.
All right,
which is quite a downgrade. I will say, I forgot to mention this earlier. Actually, despite his chicken walk, I love Walken. I like him in this film.
Yeah. Ian, the God meter.
Big old chicken. David, do you really want me to walk like this?
He's staring at me, challenging me, say what you're going to say.
So what would you give it for the God meter?
I'm going to give book and film both 8.
8. Okay. All right. Fair. Understood. Andy, what would you give to the book and the film on the God meter, its substance?
Book 9.
Nice.
So far.
So, like a might be a solid 10 when I get through that
might
last
be a solid 10. Yeah. Movie 3.
All right. Gotcha. For myself, I'll start with the movie. I think the movie, as we've already mentioned, does not draw the thematic threads as coherently as it could and should. On the God meter, just looking at the movie, I mean, it kind of just takes the question on its surface, and so that it takes a very interesting question, but deals with it on its surface. So I'm going to split the difference and give the film a 5. I feel like the book does a much better job of unpacking the complexity and nuance to that. So I'm going to give the film an 8 on the God meter. And what that fundamentally means is that we give the dead zone. Hang on, I got to do my math here.
Carry the 1.
Hang on, I did it wrong, but now I'm going to do it right. Okay. So that means that we give the book, probably appropriately enough. Actually, I'll start with the movie. We give the movie a 5 out of 10. We have the movie a 5 out of 10 on the fog meter, which I feel like is probably appropriate, but we give the book a 7 out of 10 on the fog meter. So that both of those kind of feel right if I was pitching the experience of a thing. But that having been said, and we can kind of all sort of collectively Do you, let's go down the same line. Do we recommend the book and film, The Dead Zone? Blake, do you recommend the book and the film?
Yes.
Nathan?
Hey, Reed, will you do our listeners the favor and your co-host, and perhaps your other guest co-host on this? Can you speak a little bit to the Dead Zone miniseries or series or whatever it is?
Oh, yes, I can. So the Dead Zone miniseries starring Anthony Michael Hall, I have only ever watched the first 2 seasons of it. What is interesting about it is that in the first 2 episodes, they cover all the way up through the Castle Rock Strangler. So in the first 2 episodes of the first season, they get all the way up through Johnny unveiling Frank Dodd and all that other sort of stuff. And then the rest of the season progresses just episodically of Johnny encountering these things, many of which are pretty silly, some of which press forward towards the Greg Stilson plotline. The series, which I did not complete on my own, but I did a little bit of research and discovered that the series does not end with a concrete resolution of the Greg Stilson, Johnny Smith plotline. There are several progressions across, 6 seasons.
Wow.
Of just these episodic natures of Johnny.
Is it
sort of
procedural? Just kind of?
From what I understand, it's kind of procedural, and that Johnny is kind of... Yeah, and he's kind of on the run, a bit almost kind of, quantum leaping, intervening in people's lives and sort of fixing things along the way while things progress. And from what I understand, as it gets into seasons 4, 5, and 6, there are some broader narrative arcs that have their own individual resolution. But meanwhile, Greg Stilson is rising up in the ranks and Johnny is getting closer and closer to him, but the series sort of ends without tying those threads off. So that is why once I'd uncovered that, I never did the work of watching all 6 seasons to go through that, knowing some of the formatting. But again, I have seen Anthony Michael Hall makes a pretty good Johnny Smith. He's is a little bit more attractive just in general than Christopher Walken, so he's a little bit more sort of the good looking handsome leading man type. But he makes a pretty good Johnny Smith. Again, I just kind of lost interest when I realized that even from the first season.
Will you tell us how Walken does that ice line again, and if Anthony Michael Hall delivers?
I will in a second, but Anthony Michael Hall does not deliver a great ice line. I will point out one episode that I remember from the Dead Zone TV series is they literally do an episode where he joins a jury, and 12 Angry Men style, he's the only dissenting opinion because he knows the person didn't do it, but he has to convince without revealing his gift. Right, absolutely. But they were treading on thin ice there, and as Walken would say, that ice is gonna break.
That was beautiful.
Now break a vase and do it again.
Yes, thank you for that little cliff notes of the series that now I can decidedly never watch. I heartily recommend the book. Other than Walken, throughout, Sheen's performance is good, but he does not get much real estate. Other than those 2 things, I find the book far superior, and so would only kind of say watch the film as a completist.
Yeah, understood. Ian, what about for you?
Feels like heresy amongst this group.
It's what you do.
Read the book.
Read the book.
Watch the movie so that you can see, hey, that's the librarian from Ghostbusters. And you can say, hey, that's Chief Inspector Dreyfus from the Pink Panther movies.
What's the fire line? So that you can hear Walken say what about the fire?
It's the house is burning. You can still save her.
Just blew out the mic.
Oh, so great. Andy, would you recommend the book and the movie?
Well, I just put 2 and 2 together, and I've seen all 6 seasons of The Dead Zone.
That's my recommendation right
I got
there.
work to do.
Did not realize I had seen all of them. Riveting. I would recommend the first half of the book, and I would
I'll get back to you on the second half.
And I'd recommend the movie just to tickle your fancy.
All right. And for me, echoing what everybody has pretty much said, I would heartily recommend the book. I would recommend the film. I like the film. I don't think it comes close to what the book is able to deliver. So heartily recommend the book, but I do like the film and would recommend the film. And so that puts this installment of Quarterly King and yet another episode of The Fear of God in the books. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this on day of release, this is election day. And we would sincerely encourage all of you to make your voice known and make your voice heard. We thank you so much for allowing us to share our voices with you and to spend this time together with us. And we hope this finds you safe and that it finds you well. I want to thank you all so very much for enjoying this conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it and really, really appreciate it. And listeners, thank you all so very much. And as we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you guys.
Thank
Peace
you.
out.